Hi Sonoma County, it's Tuesday, October 13th, and I am in Rome, Italy. So made my way down from Copenhagen, Denmark, where I've spent about 5 days sort of deep diving into the economy and culture and political environment there. And now I'm in Rome, a little different scene, a little different history and legacy here in this country. And so one of the big takeaways so far has been this real struggle of the countries here, real struggle and maybe opportunity of the countries here in Europe that have, agreed to join this European Union, which really defines sort of their monetary policy and brings them together on, issues of trade and moving around Europe and sort of jobs and but also the countries then their independent struggle to maintain their culture and their religion and their history and their legacy and having less influence on really some of those big key drivers of the economy that now really are controlled or their policy is made at a much broader European Union level or European Commission level. And so it's been interesting to hear kind of that give and take of what it means, something that I think maybe our individual states in the United States, are very different. What folks believe in or do, or sort of the culture of California versus in New York versus the South Dakota or Chicago, are all very different. But we are governed by sort of one federal government, and so although we have sort of nuances, and we also share a common language, and so although we have nuances in kind of our cultural differences, and we would say, maybe I'm a diehard Texan or I'm a diehard Californian or a diehard Sonoma County resident. But there's a lot of similarities in sort of where we came from and how the U.S. evolved. But here there's just so much rich history and legacy that folks really attach to. So it's really an important part of this fellowship is to learn kind of what's common and also what's different as I travel through Europe and how do we relate to that and how does that impact decision making and transatlantic relationships. And so we kicked off our evening in Rome last night. We are being sponsored here by the Council for the United States and Italy, which is a nonprofit that really works on fostering the relationship between the United States and Italy based on kind of the economic and policy or politics. And so we had a nice kind of hosted dinner last night. We met with a journalist, a woman who works in telecommunications, as well as a gentleman from sort of the energy sector. And so what was probably most fascinating is we kicked off the evening with the question of, is Italy back on its feet? And it was our city coordinator here has challenged us to kind of answer that question as we go through our meetings throughout this week. And whenever we posed a question, he said, so in Italy, every time you ask a question, what is this about? The answer always starts with, well, you must understand the history. And I thought that is such a kind of a key takeaway, critical in really understanding who the Italian people are and how they operate here. And so we spent the evening kind of diving into sort of how do you measure whether a country is back on its feet? Do you look at its cinema, its tourism, its fashion on one hand and say, wow, there's a lot of success. It's wine, close to home. We know that with the value of the euro that Italian wine imports into the U.S., I think they're up about 10%. So that really resonates in terms of what's going on over here from a positive, from an Italy perspective. But then you deal with their unemployment and especially under the 15 to 24-year-olds who can't find jobs and are leaving, especially the skilled and educated ones, to go to other places like the UK or Germany to get jobs. You look at what's happening from an innovation standpoint, and there's just not been a lot of movement. And so it's an interesting challenge and a question, and one that maybe I'll provide some perspective on in a couple days when I get through all my meetings here. So today was jam-packed. We spent the morning at the Bank of Italy, understanding kind of economic policy here and the role of Italy kind of in local policy making versus the EU. And I think what was most fascinating is that 45% of the businesses here are called micro businesses, and that means they have 1 to 2 people in the business. And the theme that really runs throughout Italy is this real risk aversion to taking that really limits kind of the competitive nature of business. So when you have family-owned businesses with 1 to 2 people in them, in this real sort of attachment culture way of life that is around avoiding risk, it's really hard to create innovation here. So unlike Copenhagen, where we didn't see innovation because there wasn't kind of that financial incentive in terms of the taxation system and the social welfare net, here you're seeing that really it's deep rooted in people's belief system to not take risks. And so I think when they look at how do you grow, well, you have a one or two person family business, and as that business is passed down to the next generation, unlike in the US where a lot of times the kids say, well, I want to do better than my parents, and the parents are saying, I want more for my kids, what's passed down here from what we were learning was actually more of a mentality of, I want the same, and I'm here to protect, not grow. So if I can protect the family business, that's my job, not how do I grow it. And so it really has limited the growth of their economy here, and a real struggle for a country that's really in debt. And so that was an interesting statistic. It's very, very different than anywhere you see in the U.S. and even in other parts of Europe. And the other thing that was interesting is just the judicial system here. So if you have any conflict or any contract conflict, it can take 1,600 days, 5 years, to really have that contract, even minimal contract dispute go through the court system. And so that really does stymie some of that innovation and really folks' desire to do business here or to have a company or grow a business or limit innovation. So lots of learning here. We then spent the afternoon at Enel Group, which is one of the sort of global leaders in energy, and had a great conversation, met with their innovation chief innovation officer and some other team members, including their investor relations person, and learned about how they're really working locally to create collaborative partnerships. It was really interesting. I got to talk a lot about how proud I am of Sonoma Clean Power locally and what we've been able to do in that partnership and really be able to bring in our energy and focus on renewable energy locally. And had that be part of the conversation. There was a lot of dialogue around the wine industry and how energy is such an important thing to watch and be proactive on, and how we really are doing our part when it comes to that. So that kind of climate action and energy efficiency is definitely another theme that's been running throughout my fellowship. So more to come on that. Had more afternoon meetings, and I'm really excited to be here in Rome and learn more about Southern Europe and what that's all like and how they fit into sort of the larger global picture. So more to come. Stay tuned. Nice to see you all. Bye.